point of the service, the rainbow over your head, although you did use the W word in your song, so Dean's pretty unhappy about that. Thanks, girls. Last week, our guest preacher, Bethany, she was going to tell you about Galatians. That's what the scripture was for you. She was going to tell you about the fruit of the Spirit, love and joy and peace and patience. You've heard that list. Maybe you've heard that list. But Bethany got sick. And so Saturday, I was out camping and I get a text. She says, I've got a fever. I've got a fever. I don't know if I can make it. I said, more cowbell is the only thing that can fix that. She didn't find that funny. So I told her, just don't talk to the older folks. Don't get them sick. She didn't find that funny. Finally, she was nice enough to find a guest preacher. And so Jan came and helped us out. So thanks to Jan and Sam who did that. But the gist of the background of Galatians, and I think this is a perfect setup for the Christmas season. First of all, the Galatians, they were the Gauls first. You probably heard that word. The Gauls lived in southern France, and they were kind of the red-headed stepchildren of the Celts. The Celts would look down on them and think like, oh, those are those backwards people. And so Celts lived in France, and they went all over the world and started Celtic this and that, which has come over to a lot of us. I know at Meyer's house, that's a big thing. So the Gauls, I know when I'm not wanted, so they were tired of living in the shadow of the Celts, so they moved on. And they got to like really far northern Greece, southern Bulgaria. It's the only time I've ever used the word Bulgaria in a sermon. But that's where they lived for a while. Some of them settled there and became Greek. Some of them went on to Germany to become like strong warriors and integrate with those. Others of them just didn't fit. They didn't belong. They knew this wasn't their spot. So they kept moving. They ended up in what's now central Turkey. And so the big Greek Empire said, yeah, no one wants to live there, so you can have that spot. And then the Romans, when they took over, they said, you can have your culture, that's fine. Who cares about Galatian culture? This is your land, this is your culture, it's all you. So eventually, after a couple hundred years, they felt home. They felt like they had found their home. Finally, they had a place where they belonged as a them. And when you have a place where you belong, I mean, what could be better? In your family, in your job, with your friends, when you feel out of place, something's just off. Something's just not right. Thursday, for many of us, you go to these gatherings and just, oh God, those people, I belong to those people. That's something's wrong. Did I really belong to these people? Some of us, that's the way it is on Thursday. But if you are made to feel something, part of something important, something with a purpose, for the good of your heart and the good of the world, well, when that happens, everything just seems brighter. And the annoyances of life are easier to deal with, and maybe you see a path toward wholeness or betterment, and you might have a ton of problems to deal with, everyone does, but when you belong somewhere, it's easier to face those problems with grace and perseverance. Is that true? I think so, and that's hope. Facing life with grace and perseverance. So for a couple hundred years, the Gauls in Galatia, they were doing great, but eventually, some of the earliest Christians, they show up. And in those early days, these are Jewish folks who followed Jesus, but they also kept a lot of the Jewish kind of customs and rituals, which was very normal in that time. At the beginning of the Christian church, it was a lot of Jewish people trying to figure out what they needed to hold on to and what they could give away. And so these Jewish Christians, they said to the Galatians, we got a deal for you. I'm telling you, I found this guy. He's got the meaning of life. All you got to do to belong to our club is just a few things. One, don't eat pork. And they're like, well, okay, meaning of life, bacon, it's a tough combination, but okay, meaning of life. They said, on the Sabbath, you got to stick around the house. Okay, I'm pretty tired, like a little rest would be good in my life. Number 3, circumcision. Kids, you can ask your parents what that is. But the Galatians are like, no, that's crazy. And so, they didn't even worry about belief or behavior. They just said, let's start with this ritual of belonging. Because to them, the most important thing was, how do you get to be part of this team? And this happens to us, actually, without the knife, all the time. How do we get to be part of this team? What are the struggles? We know what it's like. In order to be part of the crowd, you got to do this. You got to think that way. You got to stop doing that. You got to stop being like this. You got to keep that to yourself. And maybe we do it. Maybe we do all those things, and still we don't feel included, or we don't feel like we have integrity in the group that we're with, or we don't do it. And we're just always on the margins. And this voice starts creeping in. And when you're on the margins, this voice can be loud. It says, you're not good enough. You're not worth it. You don't belong to them. There's a reason you don't belong. Something is just wrong with you. And so you push it away for a while until it comes back. And you you start over. And maybe you join a different group, or maybe you move to a new place, or you work to find new friends, or you open yourselves up to new ideas, but nothing works and it keeps pushing at you. I give up. I mean, what's the point? I'm never going to fit in, which is the first step toward despair, which is when you have neither the grace nor the perseverance to face even the joys of life, much less problems. So the Galatians have been dealing with this for generations, sort of on this social, ethereal level. But some of us deal with that every day, right here. And when we land in depression, or we turn to the bottle, or we close our eyes to the ones we love, or we self-destruct in any number of ways, or maybe God be willing, we keep reminding ourselves that something still matters, and it holds us together, and we find ways to cultivate hope, and we find people to cultivate hope with us. Maybe we come and we tell stories, and we rehearse the lessons of holding on together, and we listen to songs about the rainbows above us, even in the storms. But Paul hears their struggle. Paul hears what's going on, and he sends him a letter. And he says, hey, I know what you're fighting about, that whole circumcision thing. I wouldn't want to have to deal with that either. But Paul says, I also know that what you're fighting about isn't what you're really fighting about. It never is. And I want you to think about your home. If you've got a partner at home, if you've had a partner at home, when the same thing comes up for the 100th time, you're not fighting about that thing. You're fighting about the thing behind that thing. It's never about how she loads the dishwasher. Sometimes it's about how she loads the dishwasher. But it's never about how she loads the dishwasher. It's never about how he talks to your parents. It's really about something deeper. And on the positive side, this is my biggest, and this is absurd that I'm giving you relationship advice. This is my deepest relationship advice right here. On the positive side, most arguments that you have with your partner is about this. I want you to be part of my team. I want to be part of your team. That's what it's about. And you fight about how to do that. On the negative side, when it starts falling off a cliff, most relationship arguments, maybe this sounds more familiar to you. If you love me, you'd do this. You'd think this. You'd stop doing that. You'd give up this over here. But of course we don't say that. We just fight about the shadows that are cast by the real longings of our hearts, which sounds invasive, and what do I know? So Paul, he doesn't. He says to the Galatians and to the Jewish Christian folks, he says, I know that you're really fighting about something, about how to make a team. I know that's what you're fighting about. So let me tell you what really makes or breaks a team. If you're stuck with all these ugly things, like jealousy and anger and quarrels and all the things that are overwhelming your group right now, does that sound at all like America? Maybe it sounds like your Thanksgiving dinner. If you're stuck with all that, I warn you, if you give into those gross things, no matter what else you do together, no matter how many songs you sing, no matter how many dinners you eat, no matter how many little things you can come together, you are going to feel alone and broken. And if that takes over, you're going to start losing hope that you can never stick together. Is he right about that? Is he right about that snowball effect of fighting that leads to despair? He uses churchy language, but his point is just human wisdom. And then Paul says, and by contrast, if you focus on love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and generosity and trust and gentleness and self-control, those things draw us together toward healing, toward growth. And when we're guided toward that, no matter what comes between you, you can maintain hope. Is that your experience? And again, he does it in churchy language, but you know from your life, you know that the more you fight, the more you want to give up. Not just in this little place, but in everything else in your life. And you know the more you love, the more hope you have, not just in your relationship, but in this task and work and at all kinds of things. Break each other down because you don't fit with my idea of what you should be, that's despair. Build each other up because that's what love does, that's hope. And you know that. You know love works better. You know what it feels to belong. You know what it feels to want to belong. You know how to cultivate love. You know how that carries you on. So why, if we know that, do we keep letting these other things knock us down and bowl us over? Why can't we stand up to the ugliness? How can we stand up better? And that brings us to Advent, which brings us to Christmas. All that stuff about Galatians is just set up for the story that Dean read today. Because in Dean's story, poor Zechariah and Elizabeth, an old couple. Actually, in your translation at the end it said he was old and his wife was advanced in years, which is some kind of euphemism that he was doing for his wife. But Luke points it out. He said they're an old couple, which means, well, they're not really worth that much to the world anymore, right? They're just old. I mean, they might be wise and gracious and be leaders in Jerusalem, and they might be perfectly comfortable in this stage of life and be able do all kinds of great things and serve, but Luke makes it a point so that his readers know they are getting on in years, which society says means you don't matter. You're washed up. And what else do we know about Zeke and Liz? Well, all these hard names at the beginning, you get a bunch of hard names when you're up here. They're up there really nicely. What they meant is, these people come from status. These are important family names. These are status names. So Zechariah came from this group of priests, and Elizabeth, her parents were like this over here, which means they were supposed to be important. They were supposed to be highbrow, but instead, they're pretty common. They're just regular people. They're just normal. Which they might be fine with that, and good holy folks appreciating the simple joys of being together and giving back to their community. But Luke's readers, what you're supposed to hear, these folks are disappointments. They're wasted potential. You could have been somebody, but this is what turned out. And they're nobodies, not just because they didn't follow in the right footsteps, but even more, they didn't have any children. Oh, gosh. Let me tell you, the people look down on you when you don't have children. Goodness gracious, there must be something wrong with him. Hey, what's wrong? Golly, he's why didn't he? Yeah, I think I heard it just a little bit ago. Yeah, he didn't know how to talk to those kids. No, they don't have children, which is fine. But again, they might be so self-assured with that, and maybe they decided they didn't want kids. And maybe they didn't hear that condemning social message. Or maybe they thought about it their whole lives, and they can't even live together anymore because they struggle through it. We don't know. But Luke's readers, all you're supposed to be tagged in on this. And Luke is written for powerful, educated people who have certain assumptions about the world. In the very first story that Luke has about God's good news, he doesn't start with creation or salvation or Jesus or God. In this very story, we meet what society calls failures who had given up, barely even cogs in the machine, just empty people. And then God says, this is the perfect place to shine hope in the world. Right here is the perfect place to embody hope. This is the perfect place to deny any inner monologue that we're not enough. This is the perfect place to take all of society's messaging about who we are and what we're worth and get rid of it. This is the perfect place, and these are the perfect people to raise John, who will grow up to point toward God's revelation in the world. From anything you might think of routine or powerless, whether in this story or in your heart, this is the perfect way to start a new vision of life and love. This is the way to point to Jesus, who can offer a new way to live together in peace, a new way to experience grace in a really harsh world, a new way to hold on to hope no matter what tries to tear you down. And it happens in Jerusalem, which is the city on a hill. It is a symbol for what can be. It is a symbol for what God has intended in the world. And sure, it's a wild mess now. If you go over there, it's crazy. And back then, it was full of dirt and depravity and all those things. But God shows up right there in the most sacred temple, right in the most profane lives, ready to radiate hope from this one place and this one family to the whole world. And God shows up still. Be it in the most holy moments of your life when hope overwhelms you with joy. Be it in the most crumbling moments of your life when the Spirit has to hold your head up. God shows up still. And that is the story that we prepare ourselves for.